Good afternoon. Today is October the 1st, and I have the pleasure to be here in Santiago de Chile with Dr. Otto Laske. It's a real pleasure to receive you in Santiago. Thank you for being here.
Same here, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you for all your teachings and all the lessons we are receiving from you.
And thank you for what I learned here.
Thank you. Very kind of you. I would like to ask you about your work and what is it exactly your social studies?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
My social science work is based on studies I did a long time ago in philosophy, social and in sociology. And I would say, this may sound a little arrogant, but I feel it is really about the human condition.
Uh-huh.
And by that I mean it is about not just human nature, but human nature or being alive in this particular society.
Uh-huh.
Because I think that the developmental studies I've made and that I've studied, that I've absorbed, historical findings that 100 years ago were different and in 100 years from now will be different. So when I speak of emotional stages and cognitive stages, I think I'm not speaking so much about something eternally true, but rather something pertinent to these times.
Okay.
Or at least this period of history.
Okay. And could you talk a little bit about what you have called CDF, the Constructive Developmental Framework, please?
Yes. This is a methodology that I have been able to develop through my studies in adult development and in psychology. And I have, about 15 years ago, I put these methodologies together, and they have to do with finding out from individuals through interviews how they make meaning of their experiences, how they construct the world conceptually, and how they operate psychologically in the world. And while these three perspectives are often separated, I have felt that only by bringing them together can one get a holistic picture of the person. And I think this is important, for instance, for coaching, that the question becomes, whom are you really coaching? How much do you care to know about the person you are coaching before you begin to coach? And this is unusual because most coaching today approaches that differently, because coaches seem to think that they already know who this person is, or they will get to know how this person is, which is of course true, but only partly true, because there are things that one can find out about a coachee that even that coachee would not know about. And this may seem arrogant, but it is rather a humbling exercise because it is not that the coach who has made assessments knows more about the coachee than the coachee himself or herself. It's rather that the coach now has the opportunity to work on the basis of what is a somewhat objective knowledge base that helps him, the coach, to put some kind of distance between him and the coachee and to be objective, more objective about the person he is coaching.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And, well, I've been studying with you for 2.5 years.
Yes.
I have learned a little bit of your model. But I would like to hear from you and into better know what kind of applications can be related to the CDF model.
Yes. CDF is a very general model. It is not really specific to, although it can be made specific to coaching versus let's say therapy or consulting or mediation, but it applies really to all kinds of work consultants do with adults.
Uh-huh.
So it's about adult development in the sense that the assumption is that children and adolescents feel and think differently from adults.
Uh-huh.
And that only adults have certain capabilities that children and adolescents do not have, and on those we focus in our work with them.
Right. And what is the common sense about CDF that you can bring to different disciplines, as you have mentioned?
Yes, I think one can say the assumption is that the human being is very complex, yeah, and that even CDF does not cover all the dimensions of a human being as far as we know of it today. But for me, the crucial nexus in CDF between what we know about different dimensions in the social sciences now is that there seem to be two different kinds of adult development. Mm-hmm. One has to do more with the emotions and how a person relates to other people emotionally, and the other has to do more with the what I call cognitive aspect of an adult, which has to do with how complexly can that person see the world, by which I mean, well, that's actually not so easy to explain, but I think intuitively you would agree that I can simplify my own state and what I see in the world and use abstractions to make it manageable. Here I come to some ethical concerns as well.
Okay.
I see my clients, well, early on in my life I had the privilege to study at the Frankfurt School with Adorno, Horkheimer and Habermas, and those people took a very critical view of society. Mm. And it was on account of their dialectical thinking that they did so, because dialectical thinking enables you not only to be critical, but to delve into the complexity of a society and the way people live, but also to be focused on what is, one might say, absent in that society. So by absent I mean that there are things a person in our time may have great difficulty achieving or developing into, that society is a very harsh, or can be a very harsh system or even cage, in which, despite all the talk about development, there's actually very little space left for people to develop due to the way they work. They are educated, and so when I spoke initially about my being concerned about the human condition, what I meant was I'm concerned about the amount of freedom to develop their potential people have today. And this will show my particular view, or maybe prejudice, that I think we are living in a very, and not in all countries, but in most countries and in different ways, we live in a very administered world, which is dominated by logical thinking, that is essentially classification, that you belong into this box and not in that one, and that you have to do certain things and not others, and that you can buy certain things but not others. And so, we are living in a class society of some kind, different in different countries. And what is the worst is that I don't think people are educated in a way that makes them either understand that deeply or even break out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, dialectical thinking has a great critical and critical potential, and a potential for transformation. In other words, I think that if a person thinks transformational, let's say dialectically, that also means he or she can see the big picture of the situation he is in, she is in, and what is more important even, or equally, they can see what is not realized,
mm-hmm.
what is open, what is the potential, but is, closed off or something. So, for me, there is in dialectical thinking, it is not only about having a big picture of the world and being critical of what one is put into, but also high value. I would give high value to the ability of people to change their situation and to transform their lives and the lives of people around them. And actually I do look at coaching that way, as an attempt not only of individual coaches but of society as a whole to bring people up to a higher level of thinking, of making meaning of their life and so forth. And so Pensamiento Dialéctico, as you have rightfully associated with my work, does not only have to do with thinking, but it also has to do with the way I look at what we call social emotional development. That means different ways of positioning myself vis-à-vis others over the lifetime. And then in addition to the cognitive and the social emotional dimension in CDF, I use dialectical thinking to tie these different findings that I've talked about a little bit together to convey to my client a somewhat holistic and also objective picture of where they are right now in their development and what their potential might be to improve, to change, to blossom.
Okay.
So for me, dialectical thinking has an aspect of social critique, I would say.
Yeah. Very. I think it's part of my experience being your student.
Mm-hmm.
I learned something like that too.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you foresee the process of average coach student becoming your student, and what kind of steps he or she should be doing for that?
I wish I could speak 15 languages.
Well, it's a good goal.
Because then I could reach students of different culture. I am mostly working in English. I have some German students and I'm learning Spanish, but it's probably a long time effort, or longer time effort. You're asking what would you like, or what
do you see new students?
What would they want to learn, or what?
How do you notice or would foresee the development during your courses?
Well, coaching is a very young profession, and it started it came out of the self-help movement in the United States, and the notion was that you could do a lot of coaching yourself, you can do it yourself, and then the notion of coach developed as somebody who can hold your hand in doing that. And so coaches today, I would think 90 or 95% of coaches today do not think of adult development in the sense of being a lifelong process in which your potentials gradually unfold in a way that a coach can help you do.
That should be a paradox in terms that
yes,
CDF is
yes.
working to develop
Right.
others, and what the model itself is going to handle
I
its own
think,
development.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question, because I feel that I'm only at the beginning of this methodology. I just was the first who put these three dimensions together and began to develop teaching materials and attract students who study this with me and then take it into their work. But I think there are so many unknown answers to the problems that CDF opens up that I would hope there is going to be a development that of CDF itself that will help to make it more subtle, to make it maybe even more easily learnable. And these are answers like, or questions rather, like, well, how does social emotional development relate to cognitive development? What would it mean to be well developed and have a great deal of well-being? What would that mean socially, emotionally, and cognitively? What would the social emotional score have to be and the cognitive score have to be to have a kind of equilibrium of development in oneself? For instance, to be concrete, what cognitive profile does one need to have to be at Keegan stage 4? We don't really know. And so we need empirical studies that would try to find out. So that would be one development of CDF. But then I would also, in the broader picture, so there are many, many, many research problems like that that have to do with the relationship of cognitive to social emotional, of social emotional to psychological. And then also, of course, of how all three together define the well-being of a person, which is no man's land. But then I would also hope that CDF can be used as an instrument of social critique, that it can lead to developing educational policies, even maybe, I don't know, immigration policy, maybe not, but educational policies in particular, and of course also movements of critical thinking that develops an articulate opposition to some regime or kind of government. So the critical potential of CDF could even be carried beyond the social emotional and the psychological and the cognitive into entirely new areas. So I am of course very biased in favor of dialectical thinking, and I think that it is, coming back to my initial point, a way to be more free than most people can now be. And by that I mean something like Roy Bhaskar expressed in the title of a book on dialectical thinking, which he called Dialectic, the Pulse of Freedom. And by freedom he meant developing resources in yourself and others by being critical of your surroundings and of yourself, and bringing into view potentials that are presently hidden, possibilities that could be realized given the technology we have, but maybe the political system does not at this time permit us to make a use of technologies that would be much more empowering to individuals than it is now. Because we are always told, the computer would help us to make our life easier, but actually we have become slaves of email. We have, it's just the opposite, you would think. There's nothing that has become easier.
That's true.
So a use is made of technology that is, I think, in some sense fatal, really not optimal, and that could change.
I hope so.
Yes.
And I would like to thank you for being here again. I'm very grateful about your teachings, and it has been a pleasure receiving you and seeing your lessons, your teachings to our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. You have wonderful insights, and not only into CDF, but also into what I do.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for that. It's a privilege.
Thank you. Thank you very much.